Okay, so 299 is done, and so ends the journey of the ICT program. This is my last class that I'm actually going to take, and it was really fun. Um, there are a number of things that I liked, things that I learned, things that I lacked, and there are also a couple of things that I really longed for, even though I couldn't do it. And a couple of things that I longed for actually led to the creation of this project through further optimization. So, there are a number of things that I liked. I really enjoyed the fact that I'm solving everyday problems that students face. I am making sure that all students, no matter how much space they have the ability and a template to deploy a home lab that they can use throughout their schooling. They can manage VMs, they have access to an enterprise grade hypervisor, and it also helps me because I didn't have a consistent Active Directory domain services lab. I would spin one up for every lab whenever I needed it, just because I didn't have the hardware to consistently keep things running when, I'm sleeping. But now I do, thanks to this project. So, in addition to that, I really enjoyed the fact of how satisfying automation is. I've been working with a lot of automation at work through using tools like Emibot, and which is Emibot is similar to Ansible in a sense, except it's a lot easier to pick up. Automation never gets old. It's incredibly satisfying to hit a button and have 5 different VMs spun up, have Windows automatically boot, have everything you need for a functioning lab to do whatever you want with. You could spin up an Active Directory lab, or you could do a work group lab. Um, in addition to that, I also wanted to talk about resource efficiency. This is a big one for me because I don't have the most powerful hardware in the world. So to come up with an efficient way to do it, I kind of have to push a lot of the hardware close to its limits because not only do I want to run an Active Directory lab, I also want to be able to host other services like Plex, like a game server. Um, I'm able to do this thanks to CPU over allocation because not all my VMs are going to be at 100% CPU usage all the time. So that means that I can allocate, if I have 4 cores on one CPU, I can allocate 4 cores to 2 different VMs. And this is huge because it means that my only bottleneck is RAM, which I'm able to get from work. So for me, it works out perfectly. I do understand that for other students now, that might be a little bit more difficult. Uh, but if you're using older hardware, in theory, it should use older RAM, which means that it will be cheaper and it will be more readily available. Alrighty, so lastly, I really enjoyed the fact that I'm building this project out of recycled hardware. I am salvaging everything from the e-waste bin. I have not purchased anything new that is essential to the project. The only thing that is essential is a home server that I already had, which I've been using for like 2 years previously, and I'm only using that to get quorum for my cluster to prevent split brain scenarios. Alrighty, so what did I learn? I actually learned quite a bit. Learned about how Ansible works. It's been on my list for years, and it's an automation platform that is transferable across many industries. I know for a fact that ILM, a company that designed Star Wars and the lightsaber, they use Ansible. So this is a foot in the door for that in the future. I learned about clustering in Proxmox. I learned about where the files are located and stored, specifically due to the fact that I had to test my playbook with like each time I made a change. And every single time I had to completely reset the cluster. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. It was incredibly finicky. So I actually ended up modifying my project slightly, and I made it so the student will spin up the cluster. and I will have documentation for that readily available. Um, this is mainly due to the fact that clustering is very sensitive to previous files, previous DNS records, and I found in Proxmox when I was testing that it just caused a lot of issues having the entire cluster be issued by Ansible. So that makes things a lot simpler as well. Um, in addition, I learned hardware components are sensitive. I accidentally touched a so it was like a screwdriver. It was like I had a dangling piece of metal near a open computer motherboard that was running. It was on. It was fully powered. The second it touched, it shorted out, almost caused a fire. And there's no saving it, unfortunately, which is definitely disappointing, as that was one of my major setbacks that I had, as that was one of my main nodes for my services. In addition to that, I learned how much of a role network latency plays, specifically when you're migrating large VMs such as Windows, which often have drives that are 64 gigs or more. When we played with clustering and we experimented with it in our ICT 211 class, we were all working on the local machines, so the failover was almost instant. With Proxmox, when you're working with multiple nodes, it's not instant, which is definitely a problem, especially if you're trying to recreate an existing live environment. Um, yeah, so next I'm going to talk about what this project lacked. I lacked the money to buy proper hardware from the get-go. So this project is a mishmash of laptops. It's a mismatch. I've got a tiny PC in there. It's whatever I had available, which is both a blessing and a curse because I'm able to learn more if it's non-standard, understand different quirks of the hardware, and it's a curse because nothing will be the same on every single node. You can get two as close as possible to be the same, but it will never be the same. In addition, the entire project lacks a redundant power source. So while the VMs themselves might be redundant and highly available, the actual power that is powering the systems is not. And that's kind of a problem because if the power bar dies, the entire rack dies. Alrighty. In addition to that, I longed for it'd be really nice to have a KVM switch. This would allow me to easier test and reinstall Proxmox on my nodes as needed because, like I said, playing when you're using clusters, you delete completely clearing any trace of the cluster will cause issues. And it's recommended that you reinstall Proxmox every single time. And because I'm using non-standard hardware, that's a whole other issue with cabling and figuring out where everything goes, and it just makes a mess of everything. And next, I really lacked, I think it was a proper management method. So I wrote all my tasks out, I planned out everything I had to do, and then I just did them. I didn't really check in to a project manager, which I didn't have one, but it would have been nice to do more often, I think. And yeah, I find that I would have probably been a little bit more on track if I checked in more often. All right, so what did I long for? Well, first off is a space to build a full-size rack. That would be fantastic. But I don't have that, and that's kind of what's made me start thinking about this project. I would have longed for hardware not to fail. Like I mentioned earlier, I had some issues with a laptop with failing when some metal touched it by accident. In addition to that, I have had a tiny PC that I was planning on using. I had that just straight up fail. It just didn't work, which is unfortunate, but it is the way things are. And that's something that, yeah, I can't really control. If the hardware fails or not, it decides kind of when it's done. In addition to that, I longed for a dedicated NAS box with more than one NIC would be really nice. This would solve a lot of my network latency problems that I mentioned earlier, and it would also make my file transfer speeds faster. Lastly, room for proper thermal management. While the project does fit inside of an IKEA Calyx unit, the way I've mounted things are not ideal, and I'd like to change it in the future just to allow for more room for heat dissipation and things of that nature. But yeah, overall, this project was a success. I'm able to press a button and spin up an entire lab full of VMs that I'm ready to install Active Directory on, do file services on, do anything I need to on, and it will also be a great tool to augment my work resume just because I'm able to have this available to me 24/7, and I can remotely access it even at work if I need to do some testing. All right, thank you very much.